The 1970s, disco balls, bell-bottoms, and the death of the muscle car, or so they say. Because while most people think American performance died in 1971, when compression ratios dropped and emissions regulations kicked in, the truth is way more interesting. Some absolute monsters still prowled the streets during that decade, and today we're going to talk about the fastest of them all. We're counting down the 10 fastest 1970s muscle cars over the quarter mile. And trust me, some of these times are going to surprise you. So buckle up, hit that like button, and let's take a trip back to when quarter-mile times were the only numbers that mattered. Number 10. 1970 Ford Torino Cobra. Quarter-mile time, 13.99 seconds. Let's kick things off with a car that most people completely overlook when they're talking about muscle cars. Everyone remembers the Mustang. That's the car that gets all the glory, all the magazine covers, all the Barrett-Jackson auction headlines, but the Fairlane-based Torino? That's the underdog that could absolutely embarrass its more famous cousin at a stoplight. Motor Trend named the Torino Cobra their car of the year for 1970, and that wasn't just marketing hype. This thing earned that recognition. From the outside, the Torino Cobra looked almost boring, unassuming, like something your insurance agent would approve of without raising your rates. But pop that hood, and you'd find a 429 cubic inch 385 series big block V8 that was anything but boring. Ford offered 3 different power levels, and this is where things get interesting. You had the Thunderjet making 360 horsepower. Then came the Cobra Jet, also rated at 360 horsepower. Though everyone who drove both knew the Cobra Jet was making more. And if you really wanted to go racing, you checked the drag pack option and got the Super Cobra Jet producing 375 horsepower. That's the one the serious guys bought. Motor Trend took a middling Cobra Jet, the one with the 4-speed manual and 3.91 rear gears, and achieved a 13.99 second elapsed time at 101 miles per hour. That's seriously impressive for what was marketed as a gentleman's muscle car. But here's the real kicker. 0 to 60 came in just 5.8 seconds. In 1970, that was Ferrari territory, and this was a Ford you could buy at your local dealership for reasonable money and actually insure without selling your house. The Torino Cobra represents something important about early 70s muscle. These weren't boy racer machines covered in stripes and spoilers. They were sleepers, cars that could blend into traffic and then absolutely destroy whatever pulled up next to them. Ford understood that performance didn't need to be flashy. Sometimes the fastest car in the parking lot was the one nobody expected. Number 9. 1971 Ford Mustang Boss 351. Quarter-mile time, 13.8 seconds. Here's where things get a little controversial, but stick with me. Ford built some seriously fast Mustangs in the late 60s and early 70s. The Cobra jet cars were monsters. The Boss 429 was a race homologation special that existed purely because NASCAR rulebook said it had to. But when magazines tested those cars, the results were sometimes disappointing, inconsistent, almost like Ford built them more for the spec sheet than actual performance. The 1971 Boss 351 is different. Motor Trend achieved a legitimate 13.8-second quarter-mile time with a completely stock example. No tricks, no special preparation, just a dealer Fresh Boss 351 getting absolutely wrung out. That's why it earns our 9th spot. This car actually delivered on its performance promises instead of just looking good in the showroom. Under that shaker hood scoop sat a heavily modified Cleveland V8 producing 330 horsepower and 370 pound-feet of torque. Now, those numbers don't sound that impressive compared to big block beasts coming later on this list. But Ford engineers didn't just stuff a big engine in and call it a day. They actually thought about how to make power efficiently. High-flowing 4-valve cylinder heads, an 11.7-to-1 compression ratio, aluminum pistons and forged connecting rods that could handle serious abuse, and the carburetor, that was an Autolite Forthausen 300D, made specifically for the Boss. Ford threw everything they had at making this engine special, and it shows in the performance. The result was a Mustang that felt alive in a way the bigger engine cars sometimes didn't. It revved willingly, the throttle response was immediate, and when you drop the hammer, all that carefully engineered power hit the rear tires without hesitation. The Boss 351 represents the end of an era, the last truly great performance Mustang before the dark years of the mid-70s, when horsepower ratings dropped and performance became a dirty word. Number 8. 1971 Corvette 454 LS6. Quarter-mile time, 13.72 seconds. Just as the 454 LS6 was coming into its heyday, The onset of the malaise era meant that Chevrolet had to move away from the hallowed big block in cars like its iconic Corvette. That timing was tragic because this engine was absolutely incredible. Many enthusiasts consider the 1971 Corvette LS6 to be among the last examples of the golden age. And looking at the production numbers, they're definitely rare. Just 188 examples rolled off the line that year. That's not a lot. That's barely enough to fill a high school gymnasium. CarCraft magazine got their hands on one of these rare beasts and did what any reasonable automotive journalist would do. They beat the absolute hell out of it. In bone stock form, they managed a quarter-mile time of 13.72 seconds at just over 102 miles per hour. That's impressive enough to earn a spot on this list. But they didn't stop there, because this was the early 70s and magazines could actually modify test cars without legal departments having panic attacks. They installed 4.56:1 gears for better acceleration, added headman headers and thrush side pipes for that proper muscle car soundtrack, threw on Coney shocks and a Hayden oil cooler for better performance. Then they mounted Formula One Superstock tires on 8.5-inch steel wheels and topped off the tank with premium fuel. The result? 12.64 seconds at a blazing 114 miles per hour. They shaved more than a full second off the time just by tuning an already potent stock setup. That's the magic of these old muscle cars. They responded to modifications like nothing before or since. Modern cars with their computers and emissions equipment, good luck getting that kind of improvement without spending serious money. But these mechanical monsters? A weekend in the garage and some bolt-on parts could transform them completely. Number 7. 1970 Dodge Challenger RT 446 pack. Quarter-mile time 13.62 seconds. Now we're getting into Mopar territory, and as you'll see throughout the rest of this list, Mopar muscle plays a major role whenever acceleration is the focus. The 1970 Challenger with the 446 pack might trail just slightly behind the quickest of the bunch, but make no mistake, this was a serious performer. It blasted through the quarter mile in just 13.62 seconds at 104 miles per hour, that's according to CarCraft, which tested the car in their 1969 issue just ahead of the Challenger's official release. The heart of this beast was a 440 cubic inch V8 topped with 3 2-barrel carburetors. That 6-pack setup was pure theater. Under light throttle, the center carburetor did all the work, giving you decent fuel economy and reasonable drivability. But mash the gas pedal and the outboard carburetors opened up, feeding that big block all the fuel and air it could swallow. The compression ratio was 10.5:1. The result was 390 horsepower and a monstrous 490 pound-feet of torque. Now, that's about 35 horsepower less than the legendary 426 Hemi. But here's the thing, many enthusiasts actually found the 6-pack to be the more street-friendly of the two. It was easier to tune, cheaper to maintain, and you didn't need to explain to everyone at the gas station why your car idled like it had a serious medical condition. Plus, it was a lot easier to come by. Dodge built 1,640 standard Challenger 446 pack RTS for the 1970 model year. Compare that to only about 287 Hemi-powered versions. The Challenger RT with the 6-pack represents the sweet spot of muscle car performance. Enough power to embarrass almost anything on the street, reliable enough to drive every day without carrying a toolbox in the trunk, and affordable enough that regular people could actually buy them without taking out a second mortgage. Number 6. 1970 Plymouth Superbird. Quarter-mile time, 13.5 seconds. Plymouth built the Superbird with one goal in mind, convincing Richard Petty to return to their team after a stint with Ford. In the process, they ended up creating one of the most memorable and impressive performance cars of the entire muscle car era. While the Superbird absolutely made waves in NASCAR, it also proved itself as a serious machine on the street. To transform the base Roadrunner into something more aerodynamic, Plymouth gave it a long, sloped nose cone and an unmistakable rear wing that stood a towering 23 inches high. That wing became the Superbird's calling card. You could spot one from 3 blocks away. Kids would point, adults would stare, police would suddenly become very interested in your speed. The design took clear inspiration from the Dodge Charger Daytona, which had debuted the year before in 1969. But Plymouth's designers weren't content with simply copying Dodge. They wanted the Superbird to look sleeker and more stylish. So despite what the wind tunnel data said, they modified the nose and angled the rear wing more sharply. It looked better, no question. But it actually hurt the car's aerodynamic efficiency. Period tests showed the Superbird was actually a bit slower than the Charger Daytona, anywhere from 1 to 3 miles per hour slower. Even with everything else being equal, that's the price of style. Plymouth chose looks over pure performance, and honestly, looking at a Superbird today, can you blame them? This thing is absolutely gorgeous in its own bizarre way. The Superbird represents the absolute peak of muscle car excess. A street car designed for NASCAR, a practical vehicle with a wing you could serve Thanksgiving dinner on it, made no sense. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. And even today, over 50 years later, the Superbird remains one of the most instantly recognizable muscle cars ever built. Number 5, 1970, Buick GS 455, Stage 1. Quarter-mile time, 13.38 seconds. The GS 455 Stage 1 is one of the most underrated muscle cars of its time. When Buick rolled out the GSX shortly after with its bold attention-grabbing looks, they were clearly trying to shake off the brand's understated image. But even the more subtle GS 455 was nothing to overlook. Back in 1969, Motor Trend tested the car and ran the quarter mile in just 13.38 seconds at 105 miles per hour. That blistering run earned it the title of the quickest American production muscle car for 1970. Read that again. The quickest. Not from Chevrolet, not from Dodge, from Buick, the brand your grandparents drove to church on Sunday. Now, like many automakers of that era, Buick likely played down the car's true potential, mostly to keep insurance companies at bay. Officially, the Stage 1 was rated at 360 horsepower and 510 pound-feet of torque. That was only a 10 horsepower bump over the standard 455. But anyone who actually drove one knew those numbers were complete fiction. The Stage 1 was probably making 400 horsepower or more. That would certainly explain how it managed to rip from 0 to 60 in just 6 seconds flat and hit a top speed of around 115 miles per hour. What made the GS 455 Stage 1 special wasn't just the straight line speed, it was how refined everything felt. This was a Buick after all. The interior was plush. The ride was comfortable. You could cruise at 70 miles per hour all day and arrive feeling relaxed, but drop it into second gear and stand on the throttle? That refined luxury sedan transformed into a street brawler. Quietly powerful, brutally quick, and built with that signature Buick refinement, the GS 455 Stage 1 was, and still is, a force to be reckoned with. It proved that muscle cars didn't have to be raw and uncomfortable to be fast. Number 4, 1970 Plymouth Roadrunner, 426. Hemi quarter-mile time, 13.34 seconds. Plymouth's Roadrunner was a massive hit in its heyday, right behind the Chevrolet Chevelle in popularity. It managed to sell over 80,000 units in 1969 alone. Part of that success came from brilliant marketing. The connection to the Warner Brothers cartoon gave it a playful edge. Features like the switch-activated air grabber hood scoop were pure theater. And that unforgettable comical purple beep-beep horn? Absolutely ridiculous and absolutely perfect. But this Mopar machine was more than just a gimmick. The Roadrunner had serious muscle. True to its name, it could absolutely tear up the pavement. In the December 1969 issue of Superstock magazine, testers pitted the Roadrunner 426 Hemi against the 446 pack. The result? The Hemi-powered Roadrunner ripped through the quarter mile in just 13.34 seconds at 107.5 miles per hour. Like the rest of Mopar's Hemi legends, this Roadrunner came with an official rating of 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. But like every other muscle car engine of the era, those numbers were conservative. Real-world testing suggested the Hemi was making closer to 500 horsepower at the crank. That was more than enough to launch it from 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds, which for its time was downright blistering. The Roadrunner Hemi represents the perfect combination of cartoon character fun and genuine performance substance. Plymouth managed to create a car that appealed to both kids dreaming about muscle cars and adults actually buying them. It wasn't too serious, but it wasn't too silly either. It hit the sweet spot perfectly. Number 3, 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454. Quarter-mile time, 13.12 seconds. Today, the Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454 stands as a symbol of the golden age of American muscle cars. A reputation it earned the hard way with brutal straight-line speed and a design that still turns heads decades later. Under the hood of the legendary LS6 sat a beast of an engine, officially rated at 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. making for some of the quickest 0 to 60 runs of its era. But raw numbers don't tell the whole story. This car had the total package. It looked every bit as aggressive as it drove. Big block power, aggressive styling with those cowl induction hoods, and that unmistakable growl from the exhaust made the Chevelle SS a dream car for gearheads everywhere. Now, when it comes to performance figures, Hot Rod clocked the Chevelle running the quarter mile in 13.44 seconds. Pretty impressive, right? But it gets better. CarCraft tested another LS6 and reported an even faster time, 13.12 seconds at 107.01 miles per hour. So what accounts for the difference? According to Hot Rod, it came down to gearing and traction. CarCraft's car was running 3.55 gears, while theirs had 4.10 gears, which technically should have been quicker. But thanks to better off-the-line traction, CarCraft posted the faster elapsed time. Either way, the Chevelle SS 454 was a monster at the drag strip and remains one of the most celebrated American muscle cars ever built. Number 2. 1970 Dodge Challenger RT Hemi. Quarter mile time, 13.1 seconds. If you're chasing one of the purest examples of old-school Hemi-powered muscle, it's hard to top the 1970 Dodge Challenger RT. While the iconic Cuda gets most of the spotlight these days, the Hemi-equipped Challengers are actually the rarer find. Dodge cranked out about 13,688 Challenger RT hardtop coupes that year, but only 287 of them came straight from the factory with the legendary 426 cubic inch Hemi under the hood. Officially rated at 425 horsepower with a monster 490 pound-feet of torque on tap, CarCraft managed to rip through the quarter mile in 13.10 seconds at 107 miles per hour, and that was in a Challenger RT fitted with a 4-speed manual and aggressive 4.10 gears. That performance essentially matches the times posted by the Hemi Cuda. Still, we gave the slight nod to the Plymouth thanks to its quicker 0 to 60 sprint. But make no mistake, the Challenger RT Hemi is every bit the fire-breathing street machine you'd expect from Dodge in its muscle car prime. What separated the Challenger from its Plymouth cousin was the styling. The Challenger looked meaner, more aggressive. That split grille and those body lines meant business. This was a car designed to intimidate. Number 1. 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda. Quarter mile time, 13.1 seconds. Taking the number 1 spot on our list is the legendary 1970 Hemi Cuda, a car that's as iconic as it is powerful. CarCraft magazine clocked this beast running the quarter mile in a blistering 13.10 seconds at 107 miles per hour. And honestly, that kind of performance lives up to everything the Plymouth nameplate has come to represent. At the heart of it all was the mighty 426 cubic inch Hemi V8, cranking out a factory-rated 425 horsepower and a massive 490 pound-feet of torque. That was more than enough to rocket the Cuda from 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. Not bad at all for a street-legal car on factory tires back in 1970. But the Hemi Cuda wasn't just about raw power. It had the looks to match. Its wide, aggressive stance was paired with razor-sharp body lines and a deep, menacing front grille. A dual scooped hood sat up front, while a blacked-out tail panel wrapped things up in the back. And to make sure it turned heads wherever it went, Plymouth offered it in eye-popping colors like limelight, rally red, and in violet. Only 652 Hemi Cudas were built for 1970, making it not just a muscle car icon but a rare one too. That makes it more than just a fast car. It's a piece of automotive history. A snapshot of a moment when American manufacturers were locked in combat to build the fastest street cars possible. The 1970 Plymouth Hemi Cuda earns the top spot not just because it tied for the fastest quarter-mile time. It earns it because it represents everything great about 70s muscle cars: the power, the style, the attitude, the complete refusal to compromise. And there you have it, the 10 fastest 1970s muscle cars over the quarter mile. From the sleeper Ford Torino Cobra to the legendary Plymouth Hemi Cuda, these machines proved that American performance didn't die in the 70s. These were the survivors that fought against emission standards and fuel crises to deliver legitimate performance when everyone said it was impossible. So, which of these legendary muscle cars is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this countdown, hit that like button and subscribe for more content about the golden age of American muscle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.